The Implicit Attitude Bias Survey, IAB Empirical Report by Cate Wilson. Variable Identification and Objectives. Attitude Bias Definition. An attitude is an intangible valuation of people, ideas, or values. Explicit attitudes consist of specific and deliberate beliefs that lead to cognitive actions. Subsequent cognitive processing with unconscious positive and negative appraisals is less accessible to mindful awareness. These processes influence perceptions and judgments, often presenting with unconscious stereotyping. A dissociation occurs with implicit bias and its attitudinal cause, which can be accessed and changed if the implicit bias is under conscious scrutiny. Implicit judgments are spontaneous triggered evaluations. Implicit bias grows over experience history and is unknown outside of conscious thought, affecting emotions and actions towards other social object groups. Implicit biases are widespread and vigorous, regarded as independent, yet related mental structures echoing each other. The Healthcare Provider Implicit Attitude Bias Survey aims to accurately measure stereotypical, unconscious bias attitudes for providers who routinely access prenatal women for alcohol use. Often broad, counteracting stereotypes and inconsistencies result in shared societal attitudes based on the provider's unconscious, self-perceived moral bias when assessing women as the primary fetal incubator. The attribution theory states that the outcome dictates emotional bias responses, which affect future experiences and subsequent actions. These emotional responses influence future judgments and attitudes. 21 healthcare professionals, HCPs, who assess prenatal women participated in the Implicit Attitude Bias Survey, whose central aim is to incorporate attitude statements to gather information about the strength of unconscious implicit stereotype bias. To obtain a convenient sample for this study, I posted on the ResearchGate website and also sent a request for survey completion via email. Using this procedure, I obtained 21 anonymous responses to both surveys. The Likert scale of the personal attitude statements rates from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The coding consists of a score of 1 for strongly disagree, 2 for slightly disagree, 3 for neither agree nor disagree, 4 for slightly agree, and 5 for strongly agree. The final number of participants is 21. The degree of attitude scores was coded in a high-low range, with high scores indicating positive attitude and a low score indicating negative aspect. The highest score for each response is 85, with a low score of 17. The total high rating score for 17 questions with 21 responses is 355. Study participants. Please see below for the primary demographic characteristics. The materials used to create the survey questionnaires utilize an IAB survey and the reuse of the EPQ5. Both surveys were posted on the Microsoft Forms website. Please see slides 11 through 13 for the surveys with URLs. The degree of attitude scores in a high-low range, with high scores indicating positive attitude and a low score indicating negative aspect. The highest score for each response is 85, with a low score of 17. The total high rating score for 17 questions with 21 responses is 355. The IAB range is from 17 to 85 for each statement, with higher scores of 66 to 85, indicating lower levels of attitude bias. High numerical values on Likert statements measure implicit bias correlation levels. Please see the Implicit Attitude Bias Total Scores graphics. The score distributions on the EPQ5 appear positively skewed, and the IAB distribution scores appear more normally distributed. The descriptive statistics for the total scores for the IAB and EPQ5 are listed below. Please see the Spearman-Brown reliability coefficient for odd and even halves of the IAB below. The Spearman-Brown prophecy formula reliability calculations evaluate the internal reliability of items on the IAB. A Spearman-Brown correlation ranges from -1 to +1. Values close to a -1 or +1 represent stronger relationships than values nearer to 0. A Pearson correlation quantifies the relationship between two or more variables to assess the validity coefficient obtained of -0.22. Indicating a weak correlational relationship, to assess the convergent validity of the IAB, I computed a Pearson correlation between the total scores on the IAB and the EPQ-5. The correlation was R equals -0.22. P equals 0.19, indicating a weak relationship and non-existent evidence of convergent validity, particularly given the fact that the correlation is a negative one. Please see demographic questions for both surveys. The IAB survey with instructions. The EPQ-5 questionnaire with instructions. The IAB survey's central hypothesis is to accurately measure stereotypical, unconscious biased attitudes. The split-half reliability as calculated by the Spearman-Brown prophecy was very low at 0.134. The accuracy of any survey method measurement often requires the addition and subtraction or rephrasing of the questions to improve unreliable associated scale questions. The EPQ-5 survey is empirically supported by evidence that psychological concepts are measurable. Unfortunately, the IAB, although empirically possible, fell short of a relevant test for implicit bias. The IAB is an inaccurate measure of implicit bias, although a factor in favor of the validity of self-reports for measuring personal differences in personality traits is relevant for future studies. The empirical self-reports of personality correlated